Illinois is a big state, and it's got big cities like Chicago, and it's got small towns, and it's got rural areas and suburban areas, and you meet people from every walk of life, black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American. You stop in VFW halls, you stop in diners, you go to churches, you go to synagogues, wherever you go, you're going to have a chance to meet people from different walks of life. And when I think about that first campaign, what strikes me is no matter where I went, no matter who I was talking to, I could see my own life in the life of the people whose vote I was asking for. So I'd meet an elderly vet, and I'd think about my grandfather who fought in World War II, and my grandmother who worked on a bomber assembly line during the war. And I'd think about how, when my grandfather came back home, because of this country, he was able to get an education on the GI Bill. And they were able to buy their first home using an FHA loan. And then I'd meet a single mom somewhere, and I'd think about my mom. I never knew my dad, and he left when I was just barely a baby, and so my mother didn't have a lot of money, and she was struggling, and she had to go back to school, raising a kid, later raising my sister, and she had to work while she was in school. But despite all that, because she was in America, she was able to get grants and scholarships, and her kids were able to get grants and scholarships, and they could go as far as their dreams could take them. And then I'd talk to some working folks, and I think about Michelle's family. Her dad, who was blue collar worker, worked at a water filtration plant in Chicago, and her mom was a secretary. And yet, despite never having a lot, there was so much love and so much passion. And her dad had MS, so he had to wake up an hour earlier than everybody else just to get to work, because it took him that long to get dressed. He could barely walk, but he never missed a day's work, because he took pride in the idea that, I'm going to earn my way and look after my family. And I'd see that same pride in the people I was talking to. And what this reminded me of was that at the heart of this country, its central idea is the idea that in this country, if you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to take responsibility, you can make it if you try. That you can find a job that supports a family, and find a home you can make your own. That you won't go bankrupt when you get sick. That maybe you can take a little vacation with your family once in a while. Nothing fancy, but just time to spend with those you love. Maybe see the country a little bit. Maybe come down to Roanoke. That your kids can get a great education. And if they're willing to work hard, then they can achieve things that you wouldn't have even imagined achieving. And then you can maybe retire with some dignity and some respect, and be part of a community and give something back. That's the idea of America. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what your last name is. You can live out the American dream. That's what binds us all together. Now the reason that I think so many of us came together in 2008 was because we saw that for a decade that dream was fraying, that it was slipping away, that there were too many people who were working hard but not seeing their incomes or wages go up. that we had taken a surplus and turned it into a deficit. We were running 2 wars on a credit card, that job growth was the most sluggish it had been in 50 years. There was a sense that those who were in charge didn't feel responsible. And so we came together to say, we are going to bring about the kinds of changes that allow us to get back to those basics, allow us to restore and live out those values. What we didn't realize was that some of that recklessness, some of that irresponsibility would lead to the worst financial crisis we've seen since the Great Depression. And I don't need to tell you what we've been through over the last 3.5 years, because you've lived it. Too many folks lost jobs. Too many people saw their homes lose value. Too many folks saw their savings take a hit. But you know what's given me confidence and faith is the fact that as I've traveled around the country now, just like I used to travel around Illinois, that same decencies, those same values, they're still alive, at least outside Washington. Times have been tough, but America's character hasn't changed. The core decency of the American people is undiminished. Our willingness to fight through and work through the tough times and come together, that's still there. And so, just as we came together in the last campaign, not just Democrats, by the way, but Republicans and independents, because we're not Democrats or Republicans first, we're Americans first. Just like we came together in 2008, we know that we've got to keep working, got to keep moving forward in 2012. And we knew back then that it wasn't going to be easy. These problems we're facing, they didn't happen overnight. They're not going to be solved overnight. We understood it might take more than 1 year or 1 term or even 1 president. But what we also understood was that we weren't going to stop until we had restored that basic American bargain that makes us the greatest country on earth. Our goal isn't just to put people back to work, although that's priority number 1. It is to build an economy where that work pays off. An economy where everyone, whether you are starting a business or punching a clock, can see your hard work and responsibility rewarded. That's what this campaign's about, Roanoke. And that's why I'm running for a 2nd term as President of the United States of America. Let me say this, it's fashionable among some pundits, and this happens every time America hits a rough patch. It's fashionable to be saying, well, this time it's different. This time we really are in the soup. It's going to be hard to solve our problems. Let me tell you something. What's missing is not big ideas. What's missing is not that we've got an absence of technical solutions to deal with issues like education or energy or our deficit. The problem we've got right now is we've just got a stalemate in Washington. You know, and the outcome of this debate that we're having is going to set the stage not just for the next year or 5 years, but for the next 20. On the one side, you've got my opponent in this presidential race and his Republican allies, look, I mean, we're having a good, healthy, democratic debate. That's how this works. And on their side, they've got a basic theory about how you grow the economy. And the theory is very simple. They think that the economy grows from the top down. So Their basic theory is if wealthy investors are doing well, then everybody does well. So if we spend trillions of dollars on more tax cuts, mostly for the wealthy, that's somehow going to create jobs. Even if we have to pay for it by gutting education and gutting job training programs and gutting transportation projects and maybe even seeing middle class folks have a higher tax burden. So that's part number one, right? More tax cuts for those at the top. Part number two is they believe if you tear down all the regulations that we put in place, for example, on Wall Street banks, or on insurance companies, or on credit card companies, or on polluters, that somehow the economy is going to do much, much better. So those are their two theories. They've got the tax cuts for the high end, and they've got rollback regulation. Now, here's the problem. You may have guessed. We tried this. We tried this in the last decade, and it did not work. Now, before I finish, can I say, by the way, that some of you have been standing for a while, and I see a couple folks slumping down a little bit. Make sure you're drinking water. Bend your knees. Don't stand up too straight. The paralegals will be, or the paralegals. You don't need lawyers. The paramedics will be coming by, so just give folks a little bit of room. They'll be fine. This happens at every event. I love you back. But I just want to point out that we tried their theory for almost 10 years. And here's what it got us. We got the slowest job growth in decades. We got deficits as far as the eye can see. Your incomes and your wages didn't go up. And it culminated in a crisis because there weren't enough regulations on Wall Street, and they could make reckless bets with other people's money that resulted in this financial crisis, and you had to foot the bill. So that's where their theory turned out. Now, we don't need more top-down economics. I've got a different view. I believe that the way you grow the economy is from the middle out. I believe that you grow the economy from the bottom up. I believe that when working people are doing well, the country does well. I believe in fighting for the middle class, because if they're prospering, all of us will prosper. That's what I'm fighting for, and that's why I'm running for a second term as President of the United States. Now, this is what I've been focused on since I've been in office. In 2008, I promised to make sure the middle class taxes didn't go up. And in fact, because of the recession, you needed some help, so we cut the typical family's income taxes by $3,600. So if you hear somebody say that I'm a big tax guy, you just remember $3,600 for the typical family. That's the tax break you've gotten since I've been in office. 4 years later, I'm running to keep middle class taxes low. So this week, I called on Congress to immediately extend income tax cuts on the first $250,000 of income. Now, what that means is 98% of Americans make less than $250,000. So 98% of folks would have the certainty and security that your taxes, your income taxes, would not go up a dime. And by the way, this is not a hypothetical. This wasn't some campaign promise. The reason I called on Congress to act now is because if they don't do anything, on January 1st, almost everybody here, your taxes will go up. On average,